She authentic. This other thing, this other plastic. See, I got big plans. Shopping, games, free medical checks, and I do what I'm at you back to school. There will be lots of giveaways, shopping, games, free medical checks, and I do what I'm at remember the back to school road shows, the Kingston, more manageable, and Montego Bay, August 8 to 2 September 5. Sponsored by Guardian Group, Insurance, Retirement, Investments, Live Secure, Live Easy, Home Choice, Real Nice, Bashco, the store that gives you more. Shangan Automobile, smart your future. Over 150 years of legacy. Hailing Distributors Limited, Distinction College, providing opportunities for you. And Manchester Hills Foods, real ingredients, real taste, available at retail stores island-wide.
Oxford Trading Jamaica Limited, the new standard in hotel grade, linens and bathroom essentials, hand towels, robes, sheets for extreme comfort, coffee cups, soft and elegant duvets, pillows, luxurious beach towels, and so much more. Accentuate your villas, Airbnbs, or homes. Call 876-999-0508 or visit their website, oxfordjamaica.com.
Jamaica, your voice can help shape the future of animation. The government invites you to a public consultation on the National Animation Policy Green Paper. Are you an animator, creative, storyteller, student, or passionate about animation? We want to hear from you. Join us in Montego Bay August 20 at S Hotel or Kingston August 24 at Rock Hotel from 4 to 7 p.m. Admission and refreshments are free. Brought to you by
allergies, flu, sinus symptoms, Benjamin's has the relief for you. Runners, coughs, fever, pain. Get over your symptoms fast with Benjamin's Relief Cough and Cold, Relief Sinus, Relief Flu, and Relief Children's Fever and Pain. All you need is Benjamin's Relief. Benjamin's, the trusted name for over a century.
I was going to go into like who you really are, what you do.
Here are some really important facts about radio. Radio is the closest medium to the cash register. Radio provides a 24-hour market. Radio is everywhere, in offices, cars, homes, shopping centers, hotels, cell phones, and the internet. Nearly every Jamaican has access to radio. Radio is cost-effective.
Riddim FM. Don't follow the rhythm. The authentic rhythm on Riddim 102 FM. Riddim FM.
Yes, my people, we are back. It is a Real Rock Show, and we will be here with you until 5. And as you know, I did say that we would have a special guest in-house with us. His name is Adhere Bryant, and he is a geologist. And somewhat, I would say that I see fitness as a part of his bio. So that means that he also is a fitness instructor. Am I correct?
That's correct.
And are you a part of the JDF, or were you a part of the JDF?
I would have been an officer in training.
You'd have been an officer in training.
Yes, but I decided to pursue my entrepreneurial venture.
Okay.
Which led me into creating OB Fitness.
That explains it. Okay. So the listeners, let me tell you. When I saw his post on Instagram, I said, nah, I have to reach out to him immediately. And he was speaking to certain things and showing certain features of our landscape, and just the sediments, the rocks, the formation, the things that are happening, the shift that is taking place. And though I'm not a geologist, I will never forget when my geography teacher in high school spoke to the fact that Portmore, St. Catherine, literally is an ocean. And this would have been the case because of Port Royal.
Mm.
And when she told me that, years upon years, I've often looked at the rocks. I remember going deep diving into the ocean a few years, I shouldn't say a few years ago, that's what I've been like, maybe in the late 90s. And I noticed that the rocks that I would see in the ocean look similar to the rocks that you see on Hellshire Heights.
Right.
And that to me confirmed everything that she said was true. It's not that I doubted that what she said was true,
Right.
but I know that what she was saying based on what my observations were, they both were linked.
Right.
So here we have the expert right here, and earthquake are something I'm afraid of. Earthquakes are, it's one of those natural disasters that I am most fearful of, especially learning the history of the 1692 earthquake and the 1907 earthquake, how it decimated Port Royal. And a two-time Port Royal get it. So let's talk a little bit about this. First and foremost, please introduce yourself to our listeners.
All right, so thank you very much, Lisa, for having me, and to your listeners, thank you also for tuning in. So basically, Oshie Bryant here. I am a geologist as well as a fitness professional. What led me really to dive further into this geology work that I'm doing here, it relates to the reality that as regards to what it is I would have been seeing on social media, let's just say back in 2023 when we experienced the magnitude 5.6.
Right.
And then since that experience, relatively speaking, the end of 2023, some part of 2024 is like we would have been experiencing some degree of, I would say, to the layman, frequent events.
Right.
And it would have been creating a social media stir. And for me, there would have been a degree of silence from my fellow professionals in geology. And that in addition to the reality that I as an individual who have that inside experience in terms of knowing that there isn't that much continuous earthquake research that's being conducted in Jamaica in the context of seismic hazard analysis, or basically even doing some form of deep dive as it relates to the fault behaviors of specific faults that we know based on history, has the likelihood or the power to really cause some significant damage, such as the planting gun earthquake, to say the least.
Let's speak about the planting garden, because you did a special on that one, and I actually just saw a video that you did like 3 hours ago. But let us talk a little bit about planting gardens, because planting gardens is it's somewhat relatively new to me, and I'm trying to understand what is happening there where the plate tectonics are concerned, and how does that impact the rest of the island, or more so Kingston? Because let me just ask, planting gardens, where does it run from?
All right, so planting garden fault is an extension of, let's just say, the Haiti fault line.
Oh, it's an extension of Haiti's fault line.
So it's a planting gun and Enriquillo fault zone, and it actually begins its way from in Dominica. That's the Enriquillo section there.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, the planting gun is considered as a segment, or it basically is what is considered as the real reason why we have what we call a restraining bend in Jamaica's tectonism. So this planting gun starts from the east, let's just say Morant Point, and considering how it orients in terms of its relationship in the context of Jamaica's location on the Caribbean plate, as well as the Ganabe microplate. I'm trying not to get too technical, but may I make it understand that there are basically Jamaica sits where we have the Caribbean plate to the north, Ganabe microplate. And the Ganabe microplate actually cuts Jamaica in half, long story short. Planting Garden Fault is running, let's just say, along certain boundaries of its southern and even extend up to the western end of the country. So Planting Garden can be said to run from Moran Point to sections of Hanover slash St. James, that region there. So it bends, essentially. Even though there can be other falls that we classify as falls that relates to the geography, such as, let's just say, the Crawl River. The Crawl River Fall that is in Clarendon.
Right.
That is said to be also a strike slip fault, but in essence, in terms of how I communicate it, that in and of itself reflects what the Planting Garden Fault is doing. So the Planting Garden Fault is that big fault extension that basically runs from Moran Point up to the western end of the country, right? And it can be considered as different names, but it's pretty much the same tectonism.
So the question I want to ask you is, what is happening with that fault line there with planting gardens in terms of because we've had a lot of earthquakes,
right?
And I would say since 2023 we've been active, been highly active. So is there a shift that is taking place with the fault line there?
All right, so essentially what it is that the viewers need to understand is that the active nature of the planting garden, just mentioning this because this is the one that you notice I speak mostly about.
Right.
It is, let's just say, the most active in terms of its movement rate annually.
Wow.
So it is said to be moving, generally speaking, at a rate of 7 to 9 millimeters a year, long story short.
Right.
The thing that you need to understand is that the Planting Garden Fault doesn't operate on its own all the time. In different sections of the country, it is in close proximity with other faults. So right now in my mapping project, I'm in Kingston and St. Andrew. As I would have indicated in some of the videos, it has a close interrelationship with the Wagwater fault system.
I've heard about Wagwater, and we're in trouble with Wagwater. They said that the plates are moving.
Right. So,
Right.
so they're moving at two different rates. So as I mentioned a while ago, Planting Garden is basically moving faster than the Wagwater. So because it is moving faster than the Wagwater, to a degree there is a degree of stress that can be built up at different segments in terms of where it interacts with the Wagwater. And that in and of itself can be a reason why we may experience some degree of tectonism, that we will feel in different zones of the Wagwater belt. So what we felt, let's just say for example, last year there were certain areas in Golden Spring that had magnitude 5+.
Yes.
That can be a reason behind it. Notice I said it can be because as it is right now, the research is not thorough to actually be able to verify this. You understand what I mean?
Right.
But I can infer from what it is that I would have done thus far with my work. The movement of the planting garden is not just a left to right movement. It's also going somewhat down and up.
Right.
That's why in the geologic literature we will say there is a transpression zone. In other words, it's sliding, but it's also causing build-up of mountains and or sinking down of different areas. Right? So that kind of relationship is why, in terms of the landscape, we can observe that there are different things that can take place at different sections. Give an example: Hermitage Dam. I would have done a video on Hermitage Dam where I said that Hermitage Dam, in terms of its situation, is like perfect to be a dam because the relationship between the Wagwater and the planting garden leads to what we call pull-apart basin. So right there, it's like a depression. In a sense, you understand what I mean? And that has to do a lot with the structural geology or the reality that the planting garden fault moves the way it moves, which is down. You understand what I mean? So it creates a degree of what we call a subsidence. And it just means therefore that all of the water can just funnel into that location of the Hermitage Dam, right? In other locations though, like say for example, when you're getting close to the Blue Mountain Belt, the planting garden can have a degree of a compression. In other words, it can result in mountain building. That's the reason why the Blue Mountain Peak, as an example, continues to rise.
Right. Because
of the relationship that the planting garden can have with the other faults there. Now, this insight is what it is that I'm talking about that Jamaica should be invested more into in terms of trying to understand the fault behavior.
Right.
Because just sitting down and, I would say, relying on the research of 20+ years ago, as an example, from Margaret Wiggins Grandison or Dr. Lyndon Brown, and these are past heads of the Earthquake Unit of Jamaica, and other researchers such as Paul Mann. And even, we have Professor Simon Mitchell, who is a professor of sedimentology at the UWI Geological division. At
Right.
the end of the day, the investment is not being put there from the standpoint of the government to really plant that kind of support for
Right.
fellow geologists like myself to go out into the field and to do the work.
Right.
Put it like this, a OB fitness a pay for me do what me I do and I share with the public. So you must understand.
And I'm pretty sure a lot of you've gotten so much feedback. I appreciate it so much because I've taken such an interest in understanding what is happening with plate tectonics and how. And I tell my listeners all the time, because I fear earthquakes so much, I have taken such a keen interest in how these plates operate. For example, in 2012 or 2011, we were actually warned, I think, by an American seismologist, right, that we are sitting on a ticking time bomb. When we tell people these things, they say you're being negative. But what I want Jamaicans to understand, this is not the time to be talking about praying, because prayers without work is it's useless, it's pointless. What we need to focus on right now, which I do not hear and I don't see too much of that happening, in fact, very little, preparedness. Because we are in a bad position right now. And I need for our listeners and for our viewers and people who hear, because one of the things I try to do is to talk to my boys, especially for the fact that we don't know, it may happen when they're at school. Run out and avoid areas where you have too many live wires, but they won't know the difference between a live wire. You know what I'm saying? For me, I when I say this to people dismiss what I say. And I would say I would never buy a home in Portmore. Because the seismologist, he did say that there is going to be a repeat and probably more devastating than what has taken place in the 1907 earthquake, because he's expecting us to have measurements going up to 7.9. That's almost an 8. We've seen the devastation that's taken place in Colombia and in Venezuela. I think what will save us is the fact that our infrastructures are a lot stronger. But because of the constant jerkings that we've had, some of these older buildings, they're gonna collapse, especially like the high schools and stuff like that. And I think there needs to be constant drills, constant drills. There needs to be reinforcement. There needs to be, I don't see coming from the government that we have any plan of action in place just in case, because if this really does happen, and it seems like we're inching closer, I don't know if you as a geologist could say, but it would seem like we're inching closer and closer to the realities of what this seismologist has predicted for Jamaica. And some will say, well, it may not happen in this lifetime. And one of the things I will do is calculate, all right, let me calculate the years between 1692 and 1907. That is 200 and something years. So if it is that is a pattern where it's every 200 and odd years, then we kind of have a little bit more time. But time is, it's relative. When you look at it now, the Ring of Fire is hot. A lot of people don't know why all of these earthquakes are happening. Some people, the sacrilegious people will come out and say it's the end of times, which we already know that Earth continues to evolve. And the Ring of Fire is highly active now, which is why the earthquakes are prominent and repetitive in these areas like Colombia, Japan, Indonesia, because they had some repeat episodes up to last week, So you spoke to the government not doing more than they should, and I would agree with
investments,
you.
Very specifically, at least where that is concerned, yes. I mean, the Earthquake Unit of Jamaica is by mandate supposed to be the premier as regards to doing the seismological work and research, and then being able to provide the necessary reporting in partnership with, let's just say, Adhere, who is the premier emergency and disaster response agency of the government. But at the end of the day, as a person who would have gone through geo and at the same time worked as an intern at the Earthquake Unit of Jamaica myself, I can say that The government can do more as regards to investing in geosciences research. You
Right.
understand what I say? Not just the government only, but even private sector in the real estate, because the reality is, there is a misconception that exists amongst engineering professionals, and I will speak specifically to Jamaica, where they're of the view that because they may have some access to Jamaica's building code from 2023, they would be of the view that that is sufficient, and that is the basis or the platform whereby we're seeing so many different buildings being erected. But there are gaps in that seismic building code section
Mm-hmm.
of Jamaica, and the gaps exist whereby if we do not know enough about the planting garden, and we do not know enough about the fault mechanics and behavior, then we cannot necessarily be creating a code, because we're only doing things based on what California, as an example, or Japan modalities express,
Right.
and Jamaica's realities are different. So if it's a case that we have not done the inherent work, how can we have a building code for Jamaica in that respect? You get what I'm saying?
I
So
completely get you.
in essence, they have approximations, but as I would have highlighted with Jackson, we have not been taking into account a seismic creep, which basically speaks to what I would have said earlier, that the planting garden fault is moving even though it is not slipping. Meaning it is moving even though it is not causing an earthquake that we're going to feel. It means that depending on where you live, if you live across the planting garden fault, and I was talking about that, then
Right.
it means therefore that you can expect that your foundation will be moving, your foundation is coming and needs different kind of stress, and it means therefore that the kind of engineering retrofitting work, the timeline is going to be shortened. And that kind of information is critical if you're going to purchase your property. You must know that if you're purchasing your property at this location, that this location experiences a seismic creep, that information should be present.
Exactly. So you
information-
give your buyers the option
Exactly.
to know what they're getting
But they
themselves
cannot
into.
know that if we're not doing that work. And that's the work that OB Fitness has at least given me the sponsorship platform to do. And that's the reason why I will always big up OB Fitness, because that's really start from in terms of giving me the financial background to do this. And have me here sitting right now in front of
You spoke to Jack, they spoke to the likes of Jack Hill.
you. Right.
And the seismic, so that's where I live. I'm
Right.
actually in the valley.
Okay.
And every time I think of an earthquake, I look around me and I realize that I'm very much in a very faulty space, faulty area.
Mm.
And it is predicted that Jack Hill was split into 4.
Wow.
Yeah.
Who made that prediction?
That's
Who made that?
The seismologist, he said,
It was split into 4.
yeah, he says that because the plates are weak over there.
Right. Okay.
And it's a fault, it's a proper fault.
Mm.
So there is so when maybe not 4, maybe 2, I don't know.
Yeah. But I get some damage.
Yeah, there's gonna be some that, so there are gonna be some sections of the hill that there's gonna be a breakaway that's taking place.
Right.
And he spoke to the likes of Beverly Hills,
Mm.
and one thing we do know for sure is that water does find back its territory.
Of course.
For example, when was the last time you've been to Hellshow?
To be honest, a good while.
As a geologist, you need to visit
Me
over there.
soon go back over that side of the mountain.
No,
Yeah.
because when I go over there, it makes me feel it gives me an eerie, sad,
Mm.
dark feeling. Because the water, you remember you could walk as far out as possible.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like 20 years.
And
ago
it took a long time before you get into the deep
or so. Right.
of the water. When you go to Hellshow now, you can see that most of these vendors have even had to push back
Mm.
their shacks
Mm.
because the water is coming in. And it takes me back to my geography lesson, learning that Portmore is a dumped up ocean because of Port Royal.
Mm.
Telling me that when I'm seeing this now, it means that if a tsunami should hit or we really get that earthquake, Portmore is gone.
Yeah. God, hopefully we don't get nothing like that.
No, I hope, I pray. And it sounds sad, and I wish to God it would just go somewhere else, because to say, okay, well, let's just pray that it just stays in Port Royal, and we're talking about the people's lives in Port Royal,
Mm.
because Port Royal, see, based on 1692 and 1907 earthquake, it seems as if there is something that takes place in Port. Why it affects Port Royal the most? Of all the earthquakes that we've had in Jamaica, the 2 major ones, where has gotten hit the most? Port Royal.
And that does give some indication that it's likely that it's the planting ground fault or extensions of the planting ground fault, which some of the geologists would have mentioned that no could be the South Coast fault, right? I consider that an extension based on how I see it orient, you understand?
Right.
But it more than likely is linked to the planting gun, like really slipping. So Port Royal, and even from the work I would have done recently with Bull Bay, based on how I would have observed the fault movement, which is west-southwest, that is attributing sections of Bull Bay and Port Royal to be still sinking. You understand me? Even though the fault.
So Port Royal is sinking?
It's more likely still sinking because remember, as I said to you, the planting gun is moving at a rate of 79 millimeters a year. So if it's a case of we're talking about different branches of the planting gun moving at different rates, it is likely that that level within those areas, sea level is rising within those areas. So that's something that should be considered from the angle of our planners or developers, as it relates to the plans for Port Royal, plans for Bull Bay, plans for the Norman Manley International Airport, to say the least.
I'm going to ask you now to just give me the final question. Give, in your honest opinion, where, just out of curiosity, where do you see us having the most problems and devastation when this major earthquake that we are anticipating should happen? Where do you see being at risk, high risk right now?
Kingston, St. Andrew, St. Catherine.
Kingston is big.
Those are, that's what I say, Kingston, St. Andrew, but meaning sections of St. Andrew, like, Jacks Hill, let's just say Constant Spring, like within that. So the Kingston Metropolitan Basin, that's what we consider it as.
Right.
You understand me? Sections of St. Catherine being Portmore and Spanish Town, because Portmore, Spanish Town are on what we call alluvium. Kingston, St. Andrew are also on alluvium. Planting Ground Fault runs basically within those regions, it's within reach of those regions. You understand what I mean? As well as Bull Bay. So everywhere that we see all of this major development taking place near to the coastline where the planting ground is, when that move, we have to really make sure that we're really prepared for multiple outcomes, not just shaking, but we're talking about some degree of risk from tsunami, some degree of risk of subsidence, like Port Royal sinking again, as an example, like we know with Idios, rock falls.
And they have, and what I've noticed with Port Royal is that they will seem to suffer from a lot of land liquefaction.
Yeah, liquefaction.
Liquefaction.
Right, because of the sand.
Because of the sand. So they don't have a lot of firm or solid foundation there, which is why
the sea level is high, water table is high.
Right.
And that's what I'm talking about. We're talking about so many different outcomes. We should not just think about an earthquake, disaster in terms of the shaking.
Right.
Because we have to understand that the intensity of the shaking has a lot to do with other secondary hazards or outcomes, such as the liquefaction, as you mentioned.
Right.
Right. Such as the reality that you can even have mud flows. In Colombia, there was this clip where you saw, like muddy water flowing.
Flowing from the hillside.
So if we have high water table, we're in the rainy season, as an example, if we get some serious rain and we get shake up, as an example, you can have certain areas that if they are flood prone, they can experience flooding. There are all these different things, and that's why I say we should be doing that kind of research to make sure we understand. And I'd like to mention this part as well, which we do not really focus on, is that Jamaica does also have certain kind of insights relating to, let's say, geothermal energy source. So about Bath hot spring.
Right.
As an example. The work says that the hot springs are non-volcanic related. What it is that we still do not know is, based on the nature of the movement, as an example of the faults, whether or not we can have upwelling at different locations, upwelling of magma, basically speaking. We do not know that because we're not doing those kind of geophysical studies.
But how could they say that though when Jamaica was formed from a volcano?
That's too is another reason why I said don't always just listen.
Jamaica was formed, all islands. All islands are a result of earthquakes and volcano. If you want, where proved it to me, there is this beach. Well, I call it a sea because there's a difference between a beach and a sea. It's an open sea, and it's out in Saint Anne, Runaway Bay. Now, wherever you see black rocks, that looks like to me it looks like lava rocks.
Yeah.
And you hardly see these any and anywhere. And I'm walking, I have the photos in my phone, and I'm walking along the path, and I'm like, but these are not normal rocks. These look like lava rocks. And I said to myself, do we really understand how our islands are formed? We are formed from volcanoes. So to dismiss those, and this is what I'm saying, misinformation, not enough information
and research. Right.
We don't do this.
Right.
So we just sit here, we don't know what we're on. And what I know is that or we have volcanic holes and they're dormant. I don't know if I want to use the word dormant or inactive.
They will say extinct or inactive, and they will say that because we do not exist in what we call a subduction zone, we shouldn't have volcanoes.
Right.
But California at the San Andreas Fault location has signs of volcanic activity, even though it's what we call a strike slip fault. So,
Well, and California is hilly, and where you find hills,
hills.
If you notice how a volcano erupts, when it erupts and it cools down, it forms into a hill. It forms into mountainous structures.
I wouldn't say we should be disputing certain things if we're not hearing the word. So
right? It is now 2 minutes past our 2 o'clock. We're going to go to break and we will be right back. Listen, this one is very interesting.
Oh, you know, hear me?
It's off. It's low. And yeah, and that's just low too. They're hearing it, but it's very low.
Okay.
You have to rush.
Yeah, I forget what's already. Well, we're done yet.
I want to
Alright, hold on. Let me just notify my people and give me a minute there. Where are we? Where am I here? Okay.
I was not sure what it was. What I have forgotten. But it's a very important question pertaining to the earthquake. Because you said Kingston and St. Andrew.
Right.
And it would seem to the rest of Jamaica would not be severely impacted and doesn't seem to be severely impacted or as severely impacted when it comes on to earthquakes.
Yeah. That has to do, as said, with the relationship between the vicinity of Kingston and St. Andrew with the planting gun, and we're looking at it from an angle of history,
right?
And based on the history and the of the geology of Kingston, St. Andrew, sections of St. Mary, Portland is heavily volcanics, which then now can become clays, sandy soil, that kind of a thing. So that's what we're looking at in terms of the shaking intensity. If those locations should shake, then we're talking about liquefaction, we're talking about sinking, we're talking about rockfall. Exactly. So that's the reason why we say that it's more so hazardous living within the eastern section of the country.
Right.
Relative to living. And then, based on the fact that, we would have experienced in recent time, based on records, the big ones in the eastern section of the country. That's why we say the eastern end is more than likely to experience a significant damage relative to the west.
Relatively to the west.
Right.
And that seems to have always been the history.
All right.
Because people in the west seem to feel the least.
Yeah, but remember, a lot of areas in the western end, it's predominantly limestone, as we call it, or carbonates. But the thing though is that carbonates have their own, I would say, hazards versus volcanic areas. So in the volcanic areas, we talk about liquefaction as an example.
Right.
In carbonate areas, we have to think about sinkholes. So when an earthquake goes on, if you have your house over a section of limestone where you don't know that there's a sinkhole there and the shaking is hard, then the foundation can collapse.
How would you know that there's a sinkhole?
So by right, you should do what we call geophysical testing of the foundation before you build. But as you should know, many locations across the country, a man just come up with us build. We get what
there's no real testing.
They don't test. And then when rains happen, as an example, and you see somewhere around the property at Ito, that's when they're going to try and call, so for example, a geologist in to find out if it can be done. We can't do nothing.
Because you've already put the cart before the
Sinkhole
horse.
is what we call a natural underground river system.
Mhm.
So we cannot stop where water have to run underground naturally.
I guess so, no?
Is it understand?
There was a little mini, I would call it info documentary. I wouldn't call it a documentary. But it was like a little informative video telling us about Jamaica and the underwater mountains. Because we are built on an underwater mountains.
Pretty much, yes.
When I heard that, I said then that means that we have a lot of sinkholes, but we just don't know where they are.
Yes. There are a lot of sinkholes because Jamaica is predominantly built on carbonates. I would say carbonates because carbonates is many things. Limestone is one, but we also can have aragonites as an example. You know what I mean? We can have impure limestone as another example, which is limestone that mixed with clays. You understand what I mean?
Right.
And that can give you a different kind of outcome as well. So the reality with all of this is that for the builders, for the construction industry, we have to be more so in sync with the geologists before we think about building. The pace at which we see all of this construction being done, I know that the Mines and Geology unit, the vision through its, let's just say, mapping unit, and even their field geologists cannot go across the entire country to
Right.
map all of these locations and or to say, yes, we have done the site inspection and we can give you the go ahead.
Right.
More than likely is to take place amongst where we have certain big developments. That's where you probably would have a geologist go there on their behalf. But again, if the seismologic work and the actual earthquake geology work is not being done, then we don't know.
We are now back. We are back. It is 7 minutes past 2, and I'm gonna wrap up this interview with O'Shane Brandt from OB Fitness. He is a geologist who specializes in our plate tectonics, and he's here giving us so much information, more information than we do know, things that we need to know because right now we're not in a safe zone. We are definitely sitting on a ticking time bomb, and I don't know that a lot of us are aware of how serious the serious position that we're in now. This is a time where we need to be talking to our children. If we work into large buildings, we need to have drills. We're at school, we need to be doing drills, earthquake drills, so that we can all be mentally prepared. And I know that earthquakes, when fires happening, is a different thing. We're turn fool when we are frightened and alarmed by the shaking. And I think no, fear has set into so many persons who were probably not so bothered by it simply because they've seen the devastation. And I think Venezuela is probably one of the scariest ones to look at because they had a 7.2 and a 7.4 earthquake back to back. Colombia recently, last week, just had a devastating earthquake in Bogota. So it's scary. Like really, when you see how the buildings just crumbled, yes, their infrastructure was weak as well. The scariest of it all was that the first scary one would have been Haiti. But I think people now have become a little bit more in tune and inclined to seriously look into the possibilities of what could happen. Now, the question I'd like to ask you, we were talking about this off air for the listeners who, who would be listening. You did say that Kingston and St. Andrew, which would include like Constant Spring, Jacks Hill, and where you said Port Royal.
Port Royal and
Right.
then sections of Bull Bay.
Mm-hmm.
We can also think about Portmore, sections of Portmore overalls, sections of Spanish Town.
Mm-hmm.
So these locations that are considered to be on what we call alluvium,
Right.
we would say that those areas are more so susceptible
Mm-hmm.
to it in terms of the intensity of the shaking of a big earthquake, but especially from the rupturing of the Planting Garden fault,
Right.
or let's just say the South Coast fault.
And do you see where like possibilities happening where maybe the earth could crack open?
It is likely because the reality is we can experience cracking more so with shallow earthquakes. Shallow earth,
Really?
right.
Shallow earthquake?
So we say that we can have shallow earthquake. This is based on the depth at which the epicenter is,
Right.
as an example. So, or the hypocenter. So, in essence, when you're to think about shallow earthquakes, these are earthquakes that exist or they rupture within 30 kilometers or less,
Right.
right, to the surface of the earth. Deeper earthquakes are said to occur, let's just say, at subduction zones. So, as an example, the Colombia earthquake recently is said to be at a deep earthquake, right? So even though it's a 7.4,
Mhm.
the intensity of it is more than likely less than the earthquake that would have occurred or the earthquakes that would have occurred in Venezuela, because those would have been more shallow earthquakes.
Oh.
So the closer the epicenter is to the surface, the more intense is the shaking. That's the reason why when it comes to the planting gun fault, we should be paying attention, because if it's a case that it's a strike slip fault, right, and it ruptures within 30 kilometers, and based on what it is that the Earthquake Unit of Jamaica presents us in terms of the data, the focal depth, as we call it. The majority of these earthquakes, I have not come across an earthquake that is, let's just say, 32 kilometers or so. It's like 20 plus kilometers teens in terms of depth. That's the reason why magnitude 3 plus will feel relatively intense in certain instances. So if we are talking about the magnitude 7 plus shallow, then yes, we can think about cracking of the Earth's surface. We can think about splitting up different locations, and that's the reason why, again, we have to know where we're building in respect to where the fault trace is. That's what we call it. You know what I mean?
Wow. Wow, this is a lot to digest. It's a lot to learn. It's a lot to be informed of. And wow. That's all I can say. Wow. Thank you so much for coming in. I really appreciate your time. I know I've had you a little bit over the time we planned, but when you're speaking on earthquakes, believe me, I'm going to be all your ears. It is something that I fear. I must admit, I do. And I think I fear it more because I worry about my children. Where my boy is going to be. We can't protect them all the time, and I've had my experience in 1993 with it as well.
Oh, the 93 earthquake.
The 93 earthquake. That was a bad experience for me as a child, because I was in the classroom and I just hear one rumbling sound. And it sounded like it's the garbage truck that was coming to pick up the garbage. But the sound got stronger and stronger. And by the time I looked around, I was on the ground. I was sitting down. Yes, the classroom swayed left to right.
Oh, really?
And some of us were thrown from the front to the back.
Really?
Yeah, man. The chairs were all over the place. School was done.
And just to mention, that was a magnitude 5.3.
And that was a magnitude 5.3. And every time I go back to that experience, I said, so what are we going to do if we have a 7?
Wow. Yeah, that's serious.
We were thrown back and forth. I ended up underneath my desk after a while. And the school was over. Everybody came out crying. It felt like it was hours. And I know it was just probably like 5, maybe 10 seconds. But that shake, it was an event, and it was early in the morning. And school was over. I mean, the sick bay was full. My brother, his asthma went off. Those who were asthmatic, it was a real traumatic experience. So having that with the memory of Port Royal, and having the last big one that we had in 2020, that one was really big. It shook us up. I mean, I thought that was it. When it happened, I was like, yes, it come, we're done. My brother was on the wall, I said, Jesus. I said, Jesus, it's come, it's done. Yes, Lord, because I'm telling you, with the force of the shake, at one point I thought it was going to throw me over the balcony. That's how bad it was, and I think that was a 6.9.
That was a 5.6.
Oh, that was a 5. That was not even a 6.
That wasn't even.
So you see what I'm talking about?
5.6.
And with that force, because it was strong, when you hear a Rastaman ball out, send fell strong. But say, man, it come. And you sit down there, you're like, God, just send it and done. I'm tired of anticipating this now. Just let it happen and let it be done and over with. But again, thank you so much, O'Shane.
Just to make this point clear as well, just to let the listeners know as well, it's about being prepared.
Right.
And not really being too panicky about this that we're discussing here.
Right.
This is all about preparation. So after listening to this interview, to the listeners, viewers, prepare yourself, right? follow the instructions of the relevant authorities at them. Yes, the Earthquake Unit of Jamaica. You can see the work that I'm doing on OB Fitness JM, as well as our website, joinobfitness.com. That's where I put out the reports. And let's prepare yourself. The better prepared we are, the better the chances are in the event that we get hit with a big one.
Oh God, you hear? Hit with the big one. My God. Yes, the fear continues. I'm not business what nobody wants to say. I'm afraid. I am afraid, and I just pray it doesn't happen in the night. I pray that earthquake doesn't happen in the night. It is now 16 minutes past the hour of 2 o'clock. We are going to go back to some music right now. Thank you so much once again, O'Shane Bryan from OB Fitness. He's a geologist and a specialized person in studying plate tectonics, and we needed to learn this. We needed this moment with him, and I hope to have him in here again, so that while he continues to do his research and he finds, he does more findings and he comes up with more information, we are more informed. While there's nothing that we can do about an earthquake, there are things that we can do to prepare ourselves just in case this happens. Thank you so much once again for making it a Real Rock show. It's been great and it's been our pleasure.
Yeah, man. Big up. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for tuning in, everybody.